You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to a disappointed episode of the Assembly Call. As today, your Indiana Hoosiers fall by 20 points in Champaign against the Illinois Fighting Illini, 71-51 in a game that was relatively even for about 10 minutes. But then Illinois was able to push out to a lead there midway through the first half and really just, was able to control the game from there. Indiana made a couple of little runs there in the second half to get it to 6, get it to 7. And Illinois would immediately just push it back out on a day where, Indiana just got outplayed and out tough today. And, as we're going to talk about, in a game where you're going up against a team that clearly, has a better roster and has more guys that can do more things than you do, the path to winning was really to play a crisp game, to shoot well, and to do a better job on the boards than Indiana did. And today that just wasn't in the cards. The Hoosiers did not play anywhere nearly well enough to compete on this day. And so the result is a 20-point loss. It drops the Hoosiers to 17-9 overall and 8-7 in the Big Ten. And we're going to break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I'm Jerod Morris. The coach, Brian Tonsoni, will be joining us live from Champaign. And let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. Honestly, not a lot of banner moments on a day like today. We'll go to the second half when Lamar Wilkerson, just continued to carry Indiana offensively. And unfortunately, Indiana goes into halftime down 7. It really felt like, okay, we got to do something here early in the second half to make this a game. The Illini immediately come out, push it out to an 11, 12-point lead. Wilkerson went on a little 5-0 run on his own, getting fouled down low. Then on the next possession, driving from the right wing, getting an and one. It was a nice little 5-0 run, got Indiana within 6 or 7, and kind of felt like, okay, maybe here's the chance. Tucker DeVries would miss a couple of good looks on the next few possessions, and Indiana really never challenged again after that, as Illinois just kind of steadily built that lead to its final margin. But, once again, on a day when so many of his teammates struggled, Lamar Wilkerson was there to give Indiana 20 points on efficient shooting. Only 2 for 7 from downtown, but was able to, to get inside and get some buckets, and just continues doing what he's doing from an offensive standpoint. Unfortunately, Tucker DeVries, wasn't able to make enough shots, hit a few there at the end to get himself to 13 points, but Nick Dorn unable to get going. And when Indiana doesn't have those 3 perimeter guys really going, it makes everything else more difficult. But another good showing from Lamar Wilkerson, who continues to prove that he is definitely one of the best players and certainly one of the best scorers in the Big Ten. All right, our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Homefield Apparel, now in their 10th season sponsoring the Assembly Call, and their 4th as the presenting sponsor for the Back Home Network. And if you are looking to celebrate Indiana's run to the national championship, to relive all of those moments through apparel, Homefield is the place to go. I am wearing my new shirt that just came this weekend. If you can see it, my Curt Cignetti shirt, undefeated national champions, with the great picture of Curt Cignetti in the very Miami-style color scheme on that shirt. Also got another championship shirt and patiently awaiting the jacket, awaiting some hats. It's kind of obscene how much stuff I have purchased from Homefield Apparel since Indiana won it all, and I think I speak for a lot of people on this show and on the Back Home Network, and probably watching as well. And it's not just Indiana gear. Our friends at Homefield Apparel have something for everyone. If you're a college sports fan, if you know a college sports fan, it's a great place to buy gifts because they have just the best collection of vintage apparel, not just for IU, but for so many different schools around the country. Best that you'll find anywhere. Comfortable clothing. And, of course, they're an IU business. IU grads, Kelly School of Business grads, so we love supporting them. But you can go to homefieldapparel.com. You can use our promo code HOME23, and that will give you 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Homefield Apparel, wear one for the team. Okay, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. That is the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Coach, skipping the postgame press conference with Brad Underwood. We appreciate you being here on postgame with us. You're there live. What were your initial impressions of this performance by Indiana?
Yeah, it's a 20-point loss, but there was.
Coach. Anyone else hearing?
Can you hear me?
Maybe a mic issue.
Yeah, I've got Coach. He sounds great.
Make a great point there, but
Am I good to go there, Eddie?
Yeah, you're good, Coach. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear, Coach?
Okay. All right, so what happened here? What happened here in this game was two stretches of basketball where Indiana missed shots, and that counts for a 15-point deficit. And Indiana needed to hit shots today in order to win the basketball game, and they didn't hit shots. If you would have told me that Indiana would hold this offensive team to 71 points, I would have thought that Indiana would have had a chance to win the basketball game. But they just didn't shoot the ball well. They have to hit threes, and they have to hit threes at 40% shooting in order to win a game like this where it's a mismatch. Their size and their ability to score in the lane was going to happen. And, in fact, it was somewhat encouraged defensively. I thought their defensive game plan and their defensive execution was great. Maybe not the rebounding so much, but 71 points and holding them under their yearly percentage of from three and from two, and really forcing them off the three and making their threes uncomfortable. I thought this was a really good defensive effort tonight, except for the rebounding. The problem is Indiana has to be better on the offense, and they have to hit open shots. They cannot. The math problem today was you wanted Illinois to score at the two, which they did, and you wanted to outscore them at the three, which Indiana did not. And that's why you have the difference of 20 points. And we have to remember, like, this team is fighting for a 1 seed, and they got their star guard back to Boswell. They're still down a guard. This team is a fantastic basketball team that just puts people in binds left and right with their mismatches and their offense. And I thought you mentioned that key stretch. It got down to a 7 again, and Indiana got outscored, I think it was 11-2 in that next segment. They got outscored 6-0 when DeVries picked up his second foul. So those combined there, 17-2, that's 15 points. Indiana doesn't have the firepower to overcome that against a top 8 ball club. But I thought getting those shots was pretty good. A lot of good sets run. It was just an execution effort tonight. Rebounding was poor. Shooting was poor. Illinois is really good. You lose by 20.
Yeah, and I thought, that's really my main takeaway from this game, Coach, is, I feel like over this last, 5 or 6 game stretch where Indiana has really kind of turned the season back around, it's been a positive, in getting some wins and getting back into the NCAA tournament discussion. But I think a game like this really kind of shows what the ceiling is right now and how far Indiana has to go from being a good Big Ten team to being, a great team that can compete with teams like Michigan and Illinois, in the standings this year. Because this team right now, good enough to play at home and beat teams like Purdue, to beat teams like Wisconsin. You can go on the road and beat a team like UCLA that's kind of like your peer in the Big Ten. But, when you get up against a team that has the roster depth that Illinois has, it really shows you how limited Indiana is. Illinois, the thing that just kept kind of coming to my mind as you're watching this game is it felt like Illinois just had more guys who could do more things offensively than we did. And just had a lot more things that they could go to, and Indiana, like you said, I mean, there were some of those open threes. Tucker's got to make those. You've got to get Nick Dorn giving you, at least 9-10 points in a game like this. And, if it doesn't happen, you're just going to be, almost like walking, up an escalator that's going down, and it's very hard to, to do anything. So I think that's kind of what this really showed me is, I really think that Coach DeVries and this team, they're getting the most out of what they have. But today just kind of showed the ceiling on it, And so, this roster needs to get better to avoid days like today. But I don't have, I don't walk away from this game, I guess. You lose by 20 on the road. Certainly you're disappointed. I don't walk away mad. Like, oh, these guys didn't come ready to play. They just didn't have enough firepower, in a game like this. And so let's get better. There's going to be plenty more games to win, a lot still to go in this season, but this team clearly not ready to go on the road against the Michigans and the Michigan States and the Illinois and, compete for 40 minutes.
Yeah, Illinois is coming off 2 tough losses, 2 overtime losses too, and they had 6 days or 5 days off. They were going to come in and really give Indiana everything they had. The score is 20. And I know some people think it could have been more. But, again, Indiana did what they needed to do. They just didn't execute. It wasn't an effort thing. It wasn't a strategy thing. It wasn't a coaching thing. Like, Indiana did what they did. They just missed shots and they didn't rebound. I mean, you have to do those things to win. It's not a situation where, oh my gosh, this team is absolutely terrible, not going to make the tournament. We live in that society now where when you win, we love you, and you lose, we hate you, and everyone's no good. Like, these guys laid it on the line today. They just missed shots. Like 4 wide open shots I mentioned when we get to the second half stuff. Had a scoring drought of 306. That Indiana's had that. It's not acceptable, but that's what happened in the game today. So, it went up to 16 by the 11:34 mark, and the game's pretty much over at that point. But 4 wide open threes missed. So the guys aren't trying to miss shots. The coach isn't trying to run stuff they got shots. But Illinois is just better. They were just better at doing the things they needed to do to win. So I think the crowd liked my comment down here, but
yeah, I was going to say, you're getting an ovation there. I think you really saw Illinois' athleticism and size allowed them to be more aggressive than Indiana. Whereas I think in a game like this, Indiana just really isn't able to play that aggressive style of defense that we've seen from them before. And part of it is because they just foul so much. And you can really tell they're playing a little bit less aggressive, which – you're going to force, fewer turnovers. And I think the opposing team is going to be a little bit more comfortable. And I think that's what led to Indiana missing some of the shots is they were good looks, but they were still a little rushed because I thought Illinois just did a better job of being the aggressor, being tougher at the point of attack. And so sometimes even when you get a wide open look, when you're playing like that, you're a little bit rushed, your feet aren't quite set, and you're just not as comfortable. And that's what I saw today because I think you're right. Indiana obviously didn't shoot, as well as we need to. And I think that's a combination of our guys just not, being mentally tough enough or whatever it is to make shots on the road. But I actually give Illinois a lot of credit to that for rushing us with their aggressive defense, which I thought really impacted our shooting.
It's hard to play against length. And they have really good length, and they switched very effectively on a lot of things. And there were times when I thought our shooters should let it fly, and they hesitated, and it's probably because of the length. And you saw Lamar have a couple air balls. That's indicative of what you just said is the length of Illinois on the perimeter on switching out. And it just couldn't score inside. I thought Alexis did some nice things at times inside. I thought they got some nice back cuts again at times. Just not enough. I mean, that happens in a game of basketball. And on the road, it's tough to win on the road. It's tough to beat a top 5 team in the country. We have Illinois like 5 or 6 in bracketology, and they were going to be hungry, and they still only scored. This team is probably one of the best offensive teams in the country and held them to percentages way under. They shoot 56% from twos. We held them under 50%, I think, or not under 50%, but around 60% below. But field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and their points per game. Again, we were in position to really make this a ball game but we can't shoot 22% threes. I'll go back to it over and over again. It's not – Illinois was favored by 11.5. So you kind of got beat by a little bit more. That's not super great, but that's kind of what happened today. I don't think it's a horrible sign of what's going to happen. We're going to have another tough one at Purdue. Go home, rest up, and try to come up with a game plan to beat a top, probably maybe a 1 seed or a top 2 seed again in Purdue on the road. Like, those games are difficult. I thought IU competed tonight. They just didn't do enough. It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, I think if you told any of us we're going to shoot 25% from 3-point range, probably would have thought we were going to lose between 10 and 20. It is what it is. Okay, it's time for 40 minutes in Bloomington, a recap of Indiana's loss. Let's go back to the first half, Coach. Early on, this was a close game. Back and forth. Really both teams came out, really functioning well offensively. Early on, I think it was Indiana 12-9 at the first media timeout or something like that. And I thought the game really turned. It was 16-15. Conor Enright uncharacteristically had a really bad pass on the right wing that led to, a layup going the other way. And that triggered a 10-0 run by Illinois. And the play right after that was DeVries' second foul, which I got to be honest with you on that foul. I was shocked they called that on DeVries. I really, as I'm watching it live, I'm like, Hummerkaus is just pushing him out of bounds. So when they called the foul, I was like, of course that's on Hummerkaus. So I was very disappointed that was on DeVries. Now, is it going to matter in the grand scheme of things? Probably not. But I thought him going out right at that point when Indiana had been playing well offensively, things just kind of fell apart for Indiana for 2 or 3 minutes. And unfortunately, that's something that we've seen from this team, especially when either DeVries or Lamar Wilkerson is on the bench. So that was a 10-0 run. Illinois pushes it up to, 24-15. DeVries comes back in. Indiana immediately makes a little run. Josiah Miles hit a 3. Lamar Wilkerson hit a 3. Got it back to 24-21. And then Illinois immediately pushed it right back out. And I thought, Coach, that was the story of the game, is they made that run to build that lead right there. Indiana, again, got it back to 3. But then Illinois, every time we would respond, Illinois would respond right back. And it felt like whenever they needed to string together 2 or 3 buckets, they'd be able to find a way to get it. And they just kept, now in the second half when we're coming back, but we're only, but now we're down by 7 and they push it out and it's 13. And then, by the end, it's a 20-point game. But I just thought that stretch right there, the really bad turnover to go the other way, DeVries getting that second foul, that stretch really for those next 2 or 3 minutes really ended up kind of being the decisive stretch, because Indiana would never get it closer than 3 after that, and certainly just didn't have the firepower to be able to keep up, as Illinois just consistently was able to just keep their offense going.
Yeah, that was a key stretch in the game, and really we're struggling. Connorway's struggling to come back from his injury. Coach Underwood's on the loudspeaker here doing his postgame, so I apologize if you're hearing some of that. But Connorway was late to switch up. They were doing a great job of switching fast and switching up and being there on Illinois' catches, because they take almost 52% of their shots from 3, 51.3%. They shoot 36.1, and they're the third best offensive team in the country, and we gave up 6-7 points in a row because we didn't do the game plan right. And a lot of that was Connorway. I thought Connorway was a step slow. And then DeVries comes back in, and here's why DeVries bringing up the ball, and here's why DeVries is important. And he comes right back in, and Indiana goes on a 5-0 run to cut the lead back. That was important. Holy cow, he's really loud behind me. I hope that you're not picking that up too much. But
it doesn't sound bad.
Okay. I think there at 2:05 there was a nice backdoor cut for Wilkerson from Alexis. So, again, the things Indiana's running to get plays. But the other key part of this first half that really hurt Indiana, it was 36-31, and Wilkerson's probably going to get my game ball, but he comes off a staggered screen and takes a rush 3 with Kyle and Boswell hanging on him and airballs it. Like, Indiana needed to get a shot there to get a 2 or a 3. You make it a 3-point game going into half or whatever, that's a big deal. I thought he took a bad shot, and you want Wilkerson to take bad shots because he's got to take enough, but that one was a key point. It goes back up to 38-31, and then Miles takes a shot. They're all calling for one. Enright's calling for one. The ball gets past to Miles, and he runs in and misses a layup. And luckily Illinois didn't score at the buzzer. But, again, you score there, and it's 38-34, and it's a whole different ball game, right? So there were a couple plays that the bench guys didn't make tonight, and our bench is really struggling to find. Miles has played well, but Connorway's struggling. Sisley's obviously struggling at some point because his run has dropped off, and you got to get those guys playing in order to win a game of this stature.
Yeah. No question about it. Then, Coach, we go to the second half. And again, you knew that early part of the second half was going to be important. Coming out on the road, you can't let Illinois extend that lead up to double digits right away out of the second half. And they did. Again, credit to Indiana for battling back a couple of times there to get it back to single digits. But, I thought the second half, especially, Coach, it just seemed like, whenever there was a big rebound, Illinois was getting it. Whenever there was a bucket that needed to be made to, just to keep us at arm's length, they were able to make it. And that's where I thought just saw the personnel differences in the second half, between these two teams. And sometimes you have to tip your cap to another guy who's just the best player on the court. And I thought today that was Mirkovic, who was just making every play. Sometimes even well defended, by Conor Enright. But when he's got the size advantage, and is able to shoot over him and he's making everything, he was terrific. And then, Indiana, as so many teams have found, keeping Wagler. Is it Wagler or Wagler? They were saying Wagler on the broadcast, so we'll go with Wagler. Keeping him out of the lane was just almost impossible for this Indiana team. And we want to talk a little bit more about the defense here as we go. But anything else stand out to you from the second half? I thought the other thing that was interesting is the adjustment Indiana made in the back half of the second half to start going inside more, with the shots not falling, getting Alexis involved, doing some more back cutting. That was able to get Indiana some opportunities. Clearly too few, but it was at least nice to see them, have a couple stretches there in the second half where they were able to get some stuff going offensively on a day where it just really felt like not much was working on the offensive end.
So here's that run at the start. It was 5-0 run for Illinois, 5-0 run for Indiana, and then a 6-0 run, and that was pretty much the ball game at that point. But here's how close that is. When you watch as a coach, you go back and you watch, a 20-point. How can it be close? Well, Indiana's down. What was they down 12, and they ran something brand new. They ran a little flare on the ring. On the wing with two shooters. DeVries was setting a flare. If they go over the top, then Wilkerson runs what we call a wrap and gets to the basket. We got a layup. If they go under, then you hit the flare and we hit a three. So 2 straight possessions, down 12. There's a call from the bench, something different that got Indiana back to 7. Then it goes from 7 up to 54-38, and Indiana missed 4 wide open threes. So, I don't buy the people that say, oh, we didn't do anything, we did the same old thing. Like, no, we ran good stuff. The young men just missed shots. Like, if you hit 2 of those shots, you're still in a ball game at 58 or at 54-44. Not good. But you can't, Indiana's had scoring droughts, and we haven't been able to fix it. And that's not a good thing. That you can be critical of that. But, man, you can't my son had a coach that screamed at him every time he missed a three, wide open three. That's just horrible coaching. And it's really horrible fandom when you miss a wide open three and you get mad at the offense or get mad at the young kid. Like, everyone's trying to make shots. They missed shots, key shots that allowed Illinois to get up to that 15-16, and then just coasted to the win there. There was still another good after timeout play where Alexis gets a dunk late in the half. Game was probably decided, but the kids are trying to execute there. The coach is trying to do things. It was just outmanned today, and the math problem was we gave them the 2s. We didn't get the 3s. I'm going to go back to that over and over again, but there was a lot of good things that were run. It just didn't fall. So, go back. If you don't go back and watch it, but watch it with the new eye. Not you, Jerod, but everyone, watch it with the new eye. Like, missing shots doesn't mean the team sucks. It means they were bad shooters that day, right? And that's ultimately. But Tucker is so important to this team. I thought, he does so many things. He gets so many people in the right spots. He's missing a little athleticism that hurt him at some point. But, yeah, there were a multitude of things that were run by Indiana. The other thing, and then I'll shut up, I'm going on a little long here, is Indiana played some zone at the end because of they were trying to get their defenders set to handle the high ball screen, the pick and pops, and have people there. So, there was a lot of things that Indiana was trying. It just didn't work today.
And honestly, Coach, that's my big takeaway from this game is there was a really narrow pathway to win today against a team like Illinois. It involved, having a really good shooting day, them, not making as many shots. I think being a little bit tougher on the glass, having the turnover battle be a little bit closer. What was turnovers? Yeah, they only had 2. We had 9, and so I think those things needed to happen for Indiana to have a chance, and none of them happened. And so, I think it's perfectly fair to be disappointed because I certainly thought Indiana was going to compete and at least have a chance, coming down the stretch in the final 5 minutes. Maybe it's a 5, 6, 7-point game and you've at least got a shot. And Indiana didn't do that, and this is going to be a game that's going to hurt the metrics. It's it's not a bad loss in terms of it's not going to be an albatross on your resume, but it's a bad loss in that, Indiana should be able to go, play closer than 20 points on the road against someone in the Big Ten. But again, that's just what we've seen against these top teams in the Big Ten that a lot of people think are Final Four candidates. Indiana hasn't had the firepower to compete for 40 minutes. They can have some stretches in the game, but just haven't been able to do enough. And so I walk away, disappointed, but more, it just kind of reaffirms for me what we've thought about this team all along, which it's a good team. I think it's an NCAA tournament team, but it just has so many limitations that against really good or great teams, just make it so hard, to compete for those 40 minutes without everything going right. And the biggest thing that's got to go right is shooting. And unfortunately, Indiana had one of their worst shooting performances of the season, and so that to me is just kind of where we're at on this day, but still plenty to look for here as we move forward in the season. All right, we're going to continue our breakdown of this loss to Illinois. About some meaningful moments. That is coming up next here on the Assembly Call. You are listening to the Assembly Call, so stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
All right. Thank you, Romeo. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni, who is still live from Champaign. What was the atmosphere like there today, Coach?
Oh, it was all right. I mean, this place is kind of a cool place to watch a game. They've renovated it in the last, 7-8 years. It really is a nice place to come watch a game of basketball, despite getting a loss. But it wasn't as raucous as I thought it would be. They tried to checker it out orange and blue, and I think too many people have too much orange, so it didn't look very checkered out. But nothing beats Assembly Hall, the real Assembly Hall. This one now is called the State Farm Center, but so it was all right.
All right. Well, let's talk about some Hall of Moments today, Coach. And I want to go back to a couple different items from the end of the first half. I thought there was a little stretch there at the end of the first half, again, where it kind of looked like Illinois was threatening to, take a 10-plus lead into halftime, and you had Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries, hit a couple nice mid-range baskets back-to-back that brought it back within 5. That's kind of what you saw. When Indiana was able to string together a few shots, they were able to put some runs together. It was just, too few and far between. And then there was a possession there in the first half, Coach. I think it was 32-25. And, Indiana played some decent defense, forced some tough shots. And if you remember, I think Illinois picked up 4 offensive rebounds on one possession. Now, fortunately, that possession in particular ended okay for Indiana because that's where Conor Enright took the charge, which was a good call. Conor did a great job. He did beat the man to the spot on that one. But I just thought that stretch, Coach, of giving up those 4 offensive rebounds, Indiana gets 4 offensive rebounds total in the game. Illinois had 4 offensive rebounds on that one possession. And I do think, some of that was just, I think, size and strength. I mean, I thought there were a couple of rebounds that their center, who's 7'1", just kind of grabbed over our guy because he was tougher. But I also thought there were a few of them where, we just weren't tough enough and really just didn't do a good enough job of, putting a body into somebody and attacking the rebound. And I thought there were some stretches in the second half where you saw us do that, and it was noticeable. And I think that's just one of the things for this team is, those rebounding habits really can be inconsistent. I think back to the UCLA game, which I thought was one of Indiana. I don't even remember what the stats were, but I thought that was one of Indiana's best rebounding performances. They were tough. They were attacking rebounds. And I thought today, maybe for about 20 minutes, they were doing that. And then the other 20 minutes they weren't. And Illinois is getting 4, on one possession, and so, those moments from this game really stick out to me, both because of just kind of how they showed the difference in the size and skill and strength in the rosters, but also what Indiana has to do from a focus perspective for 40 minutes to be able to compete in a game like this.
Yeah, I think there was some of that, but Illinois is I got my stats messed up earlier, but they're third in the country in offensive rebound percentage at 38.8%. Like they do it to everyone, and then when it's Indiana's weakness because of size and physicality, you're going to give up offensive rebounds, and you just don't want to give up too many, and you want to keep fighting. And so, yeah, I would imagine there's going to be some possessions on film where you go back and you didn't make the greatest effort at blocking out, but there were times Enright blocked out perfectly, and Merkovich just went over and grabbed it and threw it up. There's nothing you can do than to ask a kid to block out, and then he's 6'1" or 6'2", and the guy's 6'8" and a Serbian pro. if anything, don't switch. Don't have your switching defense in that situation. But I just thought I knew today coming into it that offensive rebounding was going to be a mismatch because they just do. Illinois. I've been over here 5 or 6 times. They do that to everyone, and they do that to people who have size. Right, it's one of the strengths. It's one of the reasons that if Illinois will advance in the tournament, that they shoot 51% of their shots from 3. You get long rebounds, and then they're big and physical, and they just go get the basketball. That's something that hopefully Indiana can get with recruiting and roster construction down the way. But this was going to be brutal tonight, regardless of effort. So. I don't know if it's 20 minutes of good effort, 20 minutes of bad effort on blocking out. I'd have to go back and watch the tape. I was not under the impression that Indiana wasn't trying and didn't have a lack of effort blocking out. It just looks bad when you give up those types of 4 rebound, positions. But I'm sure there was some things that Indiana can do better rebounding. They sometimes they block out, Jerod, and can't get the ball. Because of their athleticism, right?
Yeah, and I thought especially, like what you said with Enright. I mean, there were a couple times where he really got body into Murkovic, and there just wasn't anything he could do. But I do think there were a few possessions where it kind of felt like they were just kind of conceding the rebound, and you don't want to see that. But, sometimes in a game like this where you're getting dominated like that, that's what I mean. Like it was going to require Indiana to have 40 minutes of that competitive focus like you had against UCLA, where you're just attacking every single one, and they just didn't have that today. It's tough. It's tough too when you are trying and trying and trying, and then you're doing everything for 28 minutes, and then you just get physically, there's some of that where in the game it just gets frustrating. But the rebounding has been an issue all year, especially in these games against extreme size. Yeah, the other moment that stood out to me, Coach, it was late in the second half, and Nick Dorn got a pass down in the right corner. And I don't remember why. I don't know if he stepped out of bounds or if there was a foul away from the ball, but he got it, shot it, made it, but the shot didn't count because it got waved off, which is really unfortunate because, of course, Dorn 0 for 5. Would have been great for him to see one go through the basket that counted. But I'd like to talk about him for a minute, Coach, because he was really a revelation there for a few games when Indiana kind of got this season turned around. And it felt like, hey, if we can get, Wilkerson and Dorn and DeVries going from a perimeter perspective, man, this can make this offense really dynamic. And we've really seen him start to struggle. Number one, teams are not going to let him get a corner 3. I mean, he's not getting many open corner 3s, which is his comfort zone. And if you take shooters outside of their comfort zone, it can make things difficult. And I think, Dorn is a guy who can do a few things really well. Again, like a lot of these guys, who transferred up, you've got some athletic limitations that, against, some of these better teams really come through, but he just doesn't look as confident to me. And I think, again, part of that is because he's not able to get his favorite shots, and the ones that he's getting are a little bit rushed. Guys are a little bit closer to him. And that's respect because of what he put on tape for those 3 or 4 games. But also now for Indiana, it makes it tough for Coach DeVries because, Dorn is not a plus defender and can really get taken advantage of on that end. And it's not that he doesn't try. He just, has some limitations that hurt him on that end. So, when he's coming out, only giving you 1 point, and can't make shots like that, it's tough to keep him on the court. And I think Josiah Miles was actually probably a better option for Indiana today. Not just because he made a 3, but I just think defensively he's able to do a few more things there. So, what are you seeing from Dorn, and what are some of the things that you think, if anything, that Indiana can do to try to get him going again? Because obviously that's going to be really important down the stretch here. Yeah, they're not leaving Dorn anymore, and they're not helping. A couple things. You're seeing Enright being able to get into the lane a lot more. No one's shutting him off. Like, they're just letting him dribble around, right? And they're sticking to our shooters. And so what you saw in the last game what game was it? Was it the Oregon game? Maybe it was Wisconsin. Oregon. DeVries went to a little more of a screening action rather than the dribble handoffs and things like that, trying to get shooters open. So you're going to have to run some sets, not necessarily for Dorn, but to get other shooters open. We've seen the trouble, too, with people are just locking down on the three-point line as they should against Indiana. Conway's absence is just starting to show, and he just doesn't look right out there. He just doesn't look like he's
physically healthy enough, and he's a step slow. But he was that guy that if you're going to lock up on the threes, I can get points at the rim, right? Alexis has started to do that. They've started to run some things for Alexis, but teams are not going to double him. They're going to just say go one-on-one. And Dorn's part of that struggle now. He was getting some open looks. He was getting his feet set. Now it seems to me like he's rushing into his shot. Like on the catch, his feet aren't square. He's not comfortable. And when then the mental side comes with it too. I was hot at UCLA. I've struggled since. And you are hoping the ball goes in instead of shooting with the confidence that he displayed. That's what happens when shooters get in slumps. It becomes a mental thing as well, but it's a combination of mental. He's just got to let it rip. And Coach DeVries is really good at giving these guys confidence. So I'm not sure it's coming from anywhere, but you put pressure on yourself as a young man when you can do certain things and you're not, then you just rush. Foot, hands, your feet and your hands get rushed. But, man, he's getting guarded heavy too, just like Wilkerson and just like DeVries, and that's very difficult at any level, to combat. And I think Dorn's getting used to that at some point. And then the question is, like, Miles is doing a really good job defensively. He's not going to be that threat offensively, so now you put more pressure on Wilkerson and DeVries. They can shade. They can help off Miles on drives, so you don't get those, step-in threes. So, yeah, that's what's so interesting about a game of basketball and so difficult in the Big Ten with all of the good coaches and the strategies and what they're doing. Then you've got to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out a way to get Dorn more catch-and-shoot threes and get him back to that confidence. And that's the fun part of coaching. Not so fun on a drive back after a 20-point loss, but you go back into the lab and you try to figure that out. And part of that is roster and, do you need to play Sicily a little bit more coming back now? Do you need to do some different things? Can you get Conway back in? And, how does that all look going forward? I'm sure they're having that discussion, as soon as they get back on the bus.
Any other moments stand out for you, Coach, that you want to point out?
No, I've talked about, like, they came out and I just love the sets that Indiana runs. Again, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to score points, but they came out in what I call their chin rip series. I thought they had DeVries on the back cut, and they were a little late. Again, passing is difficult against length. So when Wilkerson cuts off a screen of Alexis and Alexis catches the ball and then there's a back screen by Wilkerson to DeVries, Indiana scored on that a few times this season. I thought it was open early. It was the first play of the game. And the other thought I had with that, too, was Illinois does a good job of scouting, and they had switched that a little bit to make it look like it was guarded. Again, just fractions of seconds sometimes in perception and decision-making can make a difference in winning and losing or having a successful play or a not successful play. But they ran three things right away. Boom, boom, boom. The game plan was in there, how they wanted to attack. And the constant theme today, the ball didn't go in. So that was a moment. I told you about there was a backdoor play to Alexis at the 2:05-minute mark. There's enough things that we haven't seen in the past that are being done that I think are really, really good. I get tired of the scoring droughts. That's where we lack a roster, too, is you had a Merkovich guy who just went and got points. You had the Wagler kid who just went to the lane and was hard to guard. But you're talking about two pros. Indiana doesn't have pros. Maybe Wilkerson, right? But you have a 6'7" point guard who can get to the rim and shoot awkward shots and the ball goes in. That gets you a lot of points. Indiana doesn't have to do that, which means their margin is so slim. So those were a couple moments that I thought were important to point out.
Even a guy like Boswell, who's kind of like their Enright, defensive guy, brings the toughness, but he can go get points. He can make shots and do a few more things offensively. And again, that's the difference. They have more guys who can do more things offensively, and that's what Indiana needs. You can dominate the bottom half of the Big Ten teams, and you can compete with the teams that are around you at home. When you have a roster like that, but it really gets, kind of put on display in games like this where you just don't have enough answers. That was the thing for Indiana today. Just didn't have enough answers for, everything that Illinois was doing. Okay, let's talk about stats, Coach. And our stat sheet stories, as always, brought to you by Jackson Hewitt Tax Services. If you live in Bloomington or the surrounding areas and you want your taxes done right, contact our friend and Chop Mob Hall of Famer Megan Mahaffey and her team in Bloomington, Bedford, and Martinsville by calling 812-339-3334 or by visiting jacksonhewitt.com. You know, Coach, you made some interesting points earlier about the defense. And I do think that there were some times where, defensively, before the shot caromed off the rim, Indiana did some good things. I think holding Illinois to 71 points, we all would have taken that. Illinois takes 31 threes. They only make 22% of them. Indiana only gives up 7 free throws. So there were some things to like defensively, but it is also worth pointing out that Illinois scored 1.315 points per possession, which is still way too much. It was just a little bit of a slower paced game. But, one thing that I've really noticed over the past few weeks as Indiana's defensive efficiency has really dropped. And even during kind of the streak where Indiana's been winning games, a lot of it's been because the offense has been clicking, but the defense has still been, giving up points, relatively inefficiently. On the flip side, Indiana only commits 10 personal fouls today. Didn't really have to deal with the foul trouble. We've had less of that foul trouble. To me, Coach, it looks like Indiana really is almost spooked by some of the foul trouble that they had early in the season, and they're not playing as aggressively defensively, up in passing lanes, up on dribblers. And I think for a team that is, and correct, please disagree if you don't think this is true, but it seems to me like a team that's limited athletically. And so to play really good defense, they've got to be as aggressive as possible. And early in the season, they were, and the efficiency was a little better, but so many guys were getting in foul trouble. And it almost feels like we've backed off that a little bit and we're not getting in as much of the foul trouble. But the defense there's some possessions where it just looks like, well, I guess we're just going to let this guy drive. Either A, because we don't have the guys to stay in front of him, and B, we're concerned with not fouling. And it seems like things are just a little bit easier and more comfortable for the opposition. Is that a fair thing to say, or do you disagree with that?
It looks that way, but we're playing top-level teams with great coaches and elite talent. And so you're going to give up points, right? So the reason that it looked better in the early season, we weren't playing this kind of level of competition for the most part. There's some of that, and some of it is your strategy, right? Indiana to win has to give up twos and hit threes. So it looks bad because when Wagler gets to the rim or there's an offensive rebound because you switch Enright into the post and you throw it in and it's an easy play, it really looks bad, like you're not playing good defense or you're not being aggressive. But really that's the strategy. The strategy tonight was to have them score more at 2 than 3 because they take a huge percentage from 3, 51% of their shots from 3 and shoot 36%. So, teams, sometimes people don't like that strategy. I know Underwood here has changed a little bit. He used to want to take away the 3, and now he's done a little bit of changing, but he's got monsters inside that he can take away the 2 and do some of that. So I'm not saying it's the perfect strategy, but it's DeVries' strategy, and I think they're playing it well. And again, if you would have told me on the drive over that Illinois scores 71, I think we have a shot at the buzzer to win this game. Yeah. So I have very little issue. The one segment I did have was when it was a 6-0 run and we weren't switching aggressively like they were the first 8 minutes when the game was close. And you can't give up 6-0 runs because you're late on a catch. Like that first 8 minutes was really great defense. And then you can try to play defense, but if you have a 6'8" Serbian pro driving on you, like that kid was fantastic today. Like there's sometimes you run into a buzzsaw, right? And that kid was the buzzsaw today. But I'd much rather see what I saw tonight without the fouling than the fouling because it takes you away offensively by sitting guys on the bench. It takes away your ability to score. And it's easier to score from the free throw line than you can with even contested 2s. But I thought Wagler, man, he made some contorted shots and things of that. Again, I was pleased with the defense tonight other than pursuing the ball the rebounding. I was not very pleased offensively. And for me, again, it comes down to shot making. I think But yeah, I don't know if it's wanting to not foul that's causing any problems defensively. Like Enright's a great defender. He struggled tonight to stop Wagler, whatever, and that's just because Wagler's going to be a top 6 NBA guy. Like sometimes you can't stop those guys. And I actually thought we guarded him well the first half, real well in the first half. I thought we took Ivisic and Wagler out the first half, and then again, when you have the depth that a team like Illinois has, then Merkovich goes off and you're down 7 at halftime when you've really laid it on the line. That gets to be physically and mentally draining too. Then when it gets to 12, you're like, man, we've done everything we possibly can, and the fourth guy's going off on us. And then you try to adjust to him, and then the first 2 guys go off again and get their double points. So, Jerod, I personally, and it's just maybe preference, I love how Indiana plays defense and runs people off the 3. But, man, at times if people hit mid-range, if they Shafino you, or if they get to the rim and score easily and you're not helping or you're not doubling in the post. So here's an example. They doubled the first time Enright got switched into the post. They doubled, pass out, Davis hits a 3. Crowd goes crazy. It's momentum. They get up 3 because they doubled. Then the next time Enright got switched in the post, they just said fight. And Merkovich went 1 for 2. That's analytics. Like, I'd take 1 for 2, Merkovich versus Enright in the post any day, and if they were going to continue to throw it in there and he only scored on half the possessions, I'm trusting my three-point shooters to drain 12 to 14 threes, and we come out of here with the major upset. So I'm okay. I'm okay with the defense. It doesn't look good statistically, right? But
no, and what I should say, I'm not even necessarily saying that I disagree with this kind of approach, if that is what it is, to try and help the foul trouble, because you got to have those guys on the court. So, and this may be, the best path, because like I said, we've been playing better. We've been winning more games, even though the defense hasn't been, as efficient, at least based on the numbers. The other number that really jumps out, Coach, is just the shot volume. I mean, Illinois took 17 more shots than we did. And when you give the opposition 17 more shots and they're as good, as good as shooters as Illinois is, you're not going to win. And a big part of that is Indiana only forces 2 turnovers and you give up 15 offensive rebounds. I mean, shot volume is just going to kill you. And so especially when the shot volume isn't going your way and the other team is more efficient, that's just a terrible, formula for Indiana on the road. Yeah. And so you can't do both. You can't not turn them over and give up all the offensive rebounds, because they're just going to get shot after shot after shot, and that's what happened today.
Yeah, and so for those people who can't understand what I'm saying, you have to finish good defensive possessions with rebounding. Indiana didn't do that. Like, you can play really great defense, but if you do give up rebounds, that doesn't mean you're a bad defensive team. That means you're a bad a bad defensive rebounding team, which Indiana is. So there's more nuanced to the game than some people may think, right? I thought, again, Indiana's defense was really, really good. They just didn't complete the defensive possessions in order to win the game. But this was more of a problem offensively tonight, Jerod, than it was defensively. You can't come into this place and only score 51 points. And maybe some credit goes to the defense and the scouting of Illinois, but hit some shots, right? And again, I'm not mad at the players. I'll never be mad. I like this team. I like this coach. I like this team. Does the roster need to be better? Absolutely. It needs to be better in several areas, and I think Coach DeVries is learning what the Big Ten is about, and you got to trust him until you can't of getting it fixed next year. But, the defensive rebounding was – You can't do that. You're exactly right. You can't do both of those and win. But yet, 71 points, I'm telling you, if you had a hot shooting night, and it's sad that that's how Indiana has to win, but that's how Indiana has to win, right?
Mm-hmm. What other numbers stand out to you?
Well, it's just what we talked about. I mean, points in the paint, because of their bully and their strength and the pro getting to the lane. You just had no answer for it. And then you got to finish your defensive. You held them to great percentages tonight. But they got to that because they got 62 shots or whatever you said, because they rebound and score in the lane, and they still shot 42% with those good looks after rebounds. So it's rebounding. It was simply rebounding, and then on the opposite side, the our shooting percentage from three. I know a 20-point game, it shouldn't be that simple. There should be a lot of issues, but I don't. I think it's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty simple game today, I think. They had better players and they played better and they executed better, and that's what makes it a 20-point loss. So to me, again, I was expecting more. I was expecting us to compete and at least make it like a 35-minute game, and we didn't do that. I'm disappointed because of that, but you flush it and you move on because you've still got a chance against Purdue. Now, obviously, we all respect how difficult it is to play in Mackey, and we'll talk about this here in the next segment, but Purdue is not a team that presents the same level of challenge from an athleticism standpoint. It's a better matchup from that standpoint for Indiana and should be a game where they have a better chance of competing, but you're still going to have to go out there and do it. And if we play like we did today, we're going to get run out of that gym too. Last number I want to mention, Coach, is just the bench scoring. Only 5 bench points. I guess you could say that wasn't a huge deal today because Illinois only had 2 bench points, but when their starters, when we couldn't even get anything from our starters, it didn't really matter. But, it is a little bit of a concern, that Josiah Miles hits a 3. Reed Bailey had one, nice little finish, but otherwise didn't do much. Sisley didn't play much. Conor Wade gets in, doesn't score. And you don't really expect your bench guys always to give you huge games on the road. You expect to get a little bit more from them at home. But again, this was a game where you were going to need some bench contributions. And outside of, I think, Josiah Miles having some good defensive possessions, there just wasn't a lot there from the bench guys. Any of those individual guys that you want to talk about or that you think is going to be especially important Friday against Purdue?
Yeah, we got to get Conaway back. We've said all along that this team will go as Conaway goes, and we've really won 5 of 7 since he's been hurt, right? And so credit to the team and the guys that are filling in for him. But you've seen a regression back to a smaller rotation without him. But his ability to guard and his ability to beat people, he had a couple big plays at Rutgers when he got limited minutes. That's the last we've really seen him play a lot. But those baskets were key in keeping that game at bay, and you miss that. And then the Miles, I think, is more defensively. His ability to defend is why he's getting more run. I think Sisley, as a freshman, is doing a lot of good things, but probably if we're at practice, we're probably seeing him struggle a little bit on the defensive end. And so that's why his minutes have probably gone more to Miles. And then you got the kids that have been out, so you need depth in order to compete on the road. And I think it showed today that Conaway's the missing piece, and then Miles is good for some minutes. Glad to see him hit a 3 because again, then that if they're going to leave you alone to guard the other players, you got to be able. I thought he passed up a 3 later in the game. He's got to be an offensive threat at least somewhat, and the Reed Bailey saga just keeps continuing, and like he's very aggressive in a game or two, and then again tonight's just not his matchup, right? He's going to struggle against the 8 behemoths that Illinois runs out there. But you're right, they need to perform better, and they probably need to perform better in practice so they get more run. Like, coaches are only going to play players that they trust for whatever reason, and that's what's happening here. And you didn't see Conaway in the second half because Conaway was not playing well, whether that's injury or he wasn't, ready coming back mentally or whatever. But he missed a couple defensive assignments. And, other than your leading scorer, if you don't do the right things defensively, you're going to find your butt on the bench, right? Even though you can hit a shot or drive or do whatever, unless you're Wilkerson or someone who can probably – I think he's playing really good defense as well or fighting. But your top offensive guy gets a little leeway, but not everyone else. So I think that's what the rotation is. But you're absolutely right. It has to get better.
All right. Well, let's go on to segment 3 here. We will hand out our game balls, our Hoosier Hustle Award, and look ahead to what's coming up on Friday against Purdue. Another big opportunity for Indiana to try and get a quad 1 victory. That is all next here on the Assembly Call.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater? The full court dribble and perfectly placed pass to set it all up. And of course celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Verdell. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni, breaking down Indiana's 20-point loss to Illinois. Time now for our game balls, presented by our friends Allie and James at Bloom Environmental. And at Bloom Environmental, they provide expert radon, mold, asbestos, and crawl space solutions to protect homes and improve indoor air quality. Call today for a free estimate and mention Assembly Call to get 10% off your system. Learn more at bloomenviro.com. I think it's pretty obvious where the game ball is going today, Coach, at least for me, but who gets yours?
Lamar Wilkerson. I just like his levels of scoring now. He's scoring at the rim. He's got a mid-range game. He's being a little more aggressive, and he's getting points even when he's the focal point. Not every night can he get 40, but just really impressed with his ability to score the basketball. And his effort on the other end is solid, I think, as well. So he just continues to impress, and we love the 40-point games, and we're going to be sad when he goes because it's fun to watch a young man like that, and he has a few more games. I just think, he is what we thought he would be when he was brought in, and we got him from Kentucky. It's just been fun to watch. But, yeah, he was by far the best player on Indiana's squad today.
Yeah, 21 points. Only 2 for 7 from downtown. Had that one wide open one in the second half. Where I don't know when the last time is he was that wide open, and I think everybody was surprised that shot didn't go down. But again, it was we talk about this a lot of times, Coach. It's like creating a poor shooting performance, when the other team, the defense has part of that. If you being tough defensively and you're rushing guys, even on wide open shots, players don't feel quite as comfortable. And so I do give Illinois some credit because I thought defensively, they really locked Indiana down, made it difficult for Indiana to do, what we wanted to do. And I think to your point, it was nice to see Lamar, again, find ways on drives, find ways on mid-range shots. Like this was, he manufactured 21 points today. There weren't a lot of just clean catch and shoot opportunities. He really had to work for everything he got. And so I give him credit because he was the one guy on Indiana's team that was really able to do it. No one else really was. But credit to Illinois for, I thought, just playing really terrific defense. Credit to Lamar for finding a way to get 20 points as it was. But you were going to have a couple of other guys, find ways. And I think, the other guy who was able to do that, and I guess we can, maybe use this to transition right into our Hoosier Hustle Award, because the guy that's going to get it for me is Sam Alexis, who I thought, the whole time, and I've always appreciated this about Alexis is he seems to have, kind of a sense of when the team is dragging a little bit and will have a hustle play or a tough rebound or go get a bucket or have some emotion that kind of gets the team going. And I thought he tried to do that a couple of times today. The team just wasn't able to rise to that occasion, but, appreciate that from Alexis. He finishes with 11 points, 8 boards, struggled against their size, just like a lot of guys did. But I don't think it was for a lack of battling. And same thing, I thought he kind of manufactured his 11 points with just some well-timed cuts, some really strong finishes at the rim. Going up and dunking and not even giving Illinois a chance to challenge those shots. So, he's been a real bright spot over the last few games. And I thought, he continued it. You could win a game like this today with Sam Alexis giving you 11 points, 8 rebounds. And that, that's what he did. And unfortunately, there just wasn't enough else that happened. But Alexis gets my Hustle Award. Who gets yours?
Sam Alexis. He's just really come on. His development and what the staff has done to get him to this level has just been fantastic. And so, you're gonna need him in order to win some games down the stretch that Indiana needs in order to make the tournament. And he's really doing a lot of solid things.
All right, let's look ahead, Coach. Indiana plays Friday, so they've got some time to go back home, practice, rest. Get ready for this game. Purdue currently number 8 in Ken Pom, obviously very strong offensively. They have some things defensively where you can take advantage of them. Indiana beat them, obviously, the last time we played. And so certainly they will not be taking us lightly. We know Mackie Arena will be ready to go on a Friday night for that game. What's your expectation in that game? And what do you think are the keys for Indiana to be able to actually go on the road and compete in that one, unlike what they've been able to do at Michigan State, and at Illinois.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, especially when you beat them the first time and then you have to go to that place with that environment. But Purdue has been struggling defensively, so if you can run your stuff and hit some shots, I think you could make Purdue go small. That's to Indiana's advantage. Painter went small in that second half because they were struggling to guard Indiana's actions. I think that's a key. But the worry for me is rebounding. They just dominated Iowa. They go on the road and beat Nebraska. And what I have heard is that they've gotten back to rebounding the basketball the way they wanted to rebound the basketball. And so if we have to play against those two bigs in such a way, and giving up rebounds and they're scoring in the paint, they're going to keep those two bigs in there. I think we're better off when we have a chance to force them to go small. That means they lose some of that rebounding. I trust us to push Purdue off the three and give up twos. I like that philosophy. The problem is, as we saw today, you got to finish, and if Purdue's starting to rebound the ball, that's how Indiana gets beat, and gets beat by 15 or so at Mackey. If you give up 20 more shots because you don't finish again, you could have outstanding defensive possessions, but if you don't finish it by securing the basketball, you're going to lose a basketball game to a very solid team, and Purdue's playing well now. I mean, they had that stretch. You go on the road, and you get two quad one wins. Again, I don't think Nebraska is a championship team, but they're a top 4 seed. Iowa starting to struggle big time. Like, talk about a team that's not super talented, athleticism. They're starting to get it handed to them pretty easily here. Lost to Maryland and that. But those are two nice wins for Purdue, and they're going to be hungry, especially those seniors that want to beat Indiana the last time they play them. Indiana's margin is so small right now. And again, that's the criticism. If you want to criticize the roster construction, puts Indiana position where their margin of error for shooting, making shots, turning the ball over, and rebounding, those 3 stats, you've got to be really good for Indiana to have a chance. When they've done that, they've won. When they haven't, they've had droughts, and they give up leads, and they lose basketball games. But that's who Indiana is. They have a chance in every game. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they won. It wouldn't surprise me if we come out of there with another performance somewhat like tonight.
Yeah. All right. Well, that one is Friday night, so it should be a fun one. We will be here with another edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show immediately after. By the way, just to update you on the tallies, Lamar Wilkerson now leads Indiana in game balls with 10. The next closest player is Tucker DeVries with 5. Hustle Award, Sam Alexis moves into a tie with Tatum Conway and Conor Enright with 5 Hustle Awards, and then Darren DeVries with 4. Wow, Tatum Conway must have really gotten a lot of Hustle Awards at the start of the season for him to have 5. But Sam Alexis quickly making up ground there. All right, it's time for last call. You're listening to the Assembly Call. Remember to check out our friends at Homefield Apparel. Use the promo code HOME23 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Highly recommend the Kurt Signetti championship shirt with the Miami color scheme. Beautiful, beautiful shirt. I'm very much enjoying wearing it today. All right, Coach. I know you got to get out of there, make the drive home. Your final thoughts on this day of Indiana basketball?
Not a result we wanted. You wanted it to be more competitive. Disappointed. I think you said that. I think that is the way that we should be. But do not be frustrated. From the middle of the 8th seed down to the last team in our Delphi bracketology, that's 15 teams. 12 of them lost, including your Indiana Hoosiers, which means there's not a whole lot of movement from where Indiana was, which is either last 9 or the first 10. So that is a good sign that this loss, and anytime you lose on the road to a top 2 seed, if you lose to Purdue, they're going to be a 2 seed in our next bracket. So those losses aren't horrible. I mean, they add to your resume in a negative way, but not like some of these teams that Virginia Tech loses at home to Florida State. Indiana will have to protect some of those games coming up, but you're almost playing with house money. Go up there, play freely, and fix some of the rebounding stuff if you can in 4 or 5 days, and give it a shot. Because, man, what a boost to the resume and to, again, the whole Indiana fandom to beat Purdue twice. That's up for grabs. But, yeah, this game got out of hand on the rebounding end and the inability to defend the 2. strap it up next time. I think this is an NCAA team. If they take care of business at home, if they can win at Ohio State on the road, if they win those 4 games, Indiana is easily in the tournament. And remember that losses don't drop you out when it comes to worrying about tourney time. You got 15 teams in, and you got about 5 to 8 teams out. So 23 teams. They're going to win and lose down the stretch here. So you just don't want to go on a long losing streak or lose to teams that you shouldn't lose, and Indiana should see their name called on Selection Sunday.
Look, I think we knew that this little couple of games at Illinois, at Purdue was going to be really tough. I think any Indiana fan, if you had said, hey, you can split these, we all would have taken it, right? Because the likelihood is that we're probably going to lose both of these games. I think, the disappointment is I really thought, hey, maybe Indiana's in a spot now where they can go compete in both of these. And obviously they weren't able to do that today. That's a bummer. That's a disappointment. I think the personnel limitations explain some of it. I don't think they explain all of it. At some point you got to make a few more shots than Indiana did. You got to grab a few more rebounds. You got to be able to do some more things. And so hopefully we see that Friday against Purdue, because after that game then, Coach, Indiana comes down the stretch, their final 4 games, 3 straight at home, Northwestern, Michigan State, and Minnesota. Northwestern and Minnesota, you're heavily favored in by 8-9 points. Michigan State, that's more of a toss-up game, but Indiana's been pretty good against Michigan State at home, in recent years. And this is a Michigan State team that's good, but I don't think is quite at that level of a Michigan, of a Purdue, of an Illinois. And so I think you've got a good chance to win that. And then the game at Ohio State is winnable. So 4 really winnable games down the stretch. What can you go do on Friday against Purdue? It feels like one of those games. Go up there, compete for 40 minutes, find some things to take away from a confidence perspective. If you can win, great. It's a low probability, but go up there, compete, play hard. Put this game today, hopefully in the rearview mirror. But we'll see. Just a really disappointing game today. Really thought and hoped it would go better, but that just wasn't in the cards today. So hopefully Indiana has a little bit more on Friday against Purdue before heading down the stretch with those 4 winnable games. But that is going to do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the live show and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can go to assemblycall.com, get on our email list as well. Special thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you hear on the show. Special thank you to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logo. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Friday night after the Purdue game. Until then.
Take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Well, the chat room loved it. Here I come. This is Tonsoni. They got problems. All right, everybody.
Being here, man in the controls. Coach, drive home safe.
All righty. We'll see you, everybody.
See you on Friday, everybody.